Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, December 25, 2008. The morning frost painted intricate patterns across the windows of the two-story colonial house on Maple Street, where the Rodriguez-Miller family lived in what appeared to be suburban harmony. Inside, however, the warmth of Christmas morning carried an underlying chill that 15-year-old Maya Rodriguez knew all too well. She sat on the seventh step of the carpeted staircase, her knees pulled to her chest, watching the orchestrated celebration unfold in the living room below. The Douglas fir tree, perfectly decorated with gold and red ornaments, stood sentinel in the corner, its lights casting a warm glow over the scene that felt like watching a movie through glass close enough to see every detail, too far away to truly be part of it. "Tommy, look what Santa brought you." Her mother's voice carried the forced enthusiasm that Maya had learned to recognize over the past 3 years. Carmen Rodriguez-Miller, once a vibrant woman who sang lullabies in Spanish and made the best tres leches cake in their old neighborhood, now spoke in measured tones, carefully modulated to please her second husband. 8-year-old Tommy, Maya's half-brother, tore through wrapping paper with the unbridled joy of a child who had never known disappointment. His blonde hair, inherited from his father, caught the tree lights as he held up a brand-new Nintendo DS, his blue eyes wide with excitement. "This is awesome. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad." Richard Miller, Maya's stepfather, beamed with satisfaction. At 42, he was a man who took pride in his ability to provide a regional manager for a pharmaceutical company who wore his success like a well-tailored suit. His sandy hair was perfectly combed, his Christmas morning outfit coordinated. Khakis and a red sweater that Carmen had bought him, though he'd never admit to needing help with his wardrobe. "And here's one for you, Princess," Richard said, handing a large, beautifully wrapped box to 6-year-old Sophia, Maya's half-sister. The little girl with her mother's dark hair, but her father's light eyes giggled as she struggled with the ribbon. Maya's fingers tightened around her own knees. 3 years of Christmas mornings in this house, and the routine never varied. Tommy first, then Sophia, then the parents would exchange gifts with great ceremony. Maya had learned not to expect her name to be called, had trained herself not to. Feel the sharp pang of hope when Richard's hand passed over packages that might, possibly, have her name on them. "Mama, look! It's the doll I wanted." Sophia held up an American Girl doll with long brown hair, complete with a wardrobe and accessories that probably cost more than Maya's mother made in a week at the cleaning service where she worked part-time. Carmen clapped her hands together, her wedding ring, a modest band that replaced the one Maya's father had given her, catching the light. "Cubanita. She's beautiful, Mia." The Spanish word slipped out naturally, a remnant of the woman Carmen used to be. Maya noticed how quickly her mother's expression shifted, how she glanced at Richard to gauge his reaction. He didn't speak. Spanish had made it clear early in their relationship that this was an English-speaking household, and Carmen had slowly, painfully, trained herself to bury that part of her identity. "What are you going to name her?" Carmen asked Sophia in English, her accent barely perceptible now after years of practice. Maya remembered when her mother's English was heavily accented, when she would switch between languages mid-sentence, when their small apartment had been filled with bachata music and the smell of sofrito. Before Richard. Before this house that never quite felt like home, despite the 3 years they'd lived here. "I think ... Isabella," Sophia announced, hugging the doll close. "Perfect choice, sweetheart," Richard said, ruffling his daughter's hair. He moved to the tree and retrieved a small, elegant box. "And this is for the most beautiful woman in the world." Carmen's cheeks flushed as she accepted the jewelry box. Inside lay a delicate gold necklace with a heart pendant. "Richard, it's beautiful. You didn't have to." "Of course I did. You deserve everything beautiful in this world." Maya watched her mother's face transform with genuine happiness, and for a moment she felt a complex mix of emotions. She was glad to see her mother happy. Carmen had been through so much after Maya's father died in a construction accident 7 years ago. The medical bills, the struggle to keep their apartment, the long nights when Carmen cried quietly in the kitchen thinking Maya couldn't hear. But watching this happiness, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that it came at a cost. At Carmen's joy required Maya's invisibility. Richard helped Carmen clasp the necklace, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Now I have something for my beautiful wife." He handed Carmen a larger box, and she opened it to reveal a silk scarf in deep burgundy. "For your collection," he said, though Maya knew her mother had never collected scarves before meeting Richard. It was one of the many small transformations. Carmen had become the woman Richard wanted her to be, complete with interests and preferences that aligned with his vision of sophistication. "It's perfect, mi amor," Carmen whispered, then quickly corrected herself. "My love, thank you." The gift exchange continued with grandparents calling on the phone, neighbors stopping by with cookies, the children playing with their new toys, while Christmas music played softly from the expensive sound system Richard had installed. Maya remained on the stairs, a ghost haunting her own family celebration. She had become skilled at reading the subtle signals that maintained this delicate ecosystem. The way Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when Sophia spoke Spanish words she'd learned from Carmen. How Carmen quickly redirected conversations when Maya's achievements at school, her honor roll certificates, her selection for the advanced English class came up in conversation. How Tommy and Sophia had learned, without ever being explicitly told, that Maya was somehow different, somehow separate from their nuclear family unit. It wasn't that Richard was overtly cruel to Maya. He never raised his voice at her, never punished her unfairly. His exclusion was more sophisticated than that of systematic erasure that was harder to name and therefore harder to fight. Maya had learned that sometimes the cruelest silences were the ones dressed up as civility. "I think that's everything," Richard announced, surveying the wrapping paper carnage with satisfaction. What a wonderful Christmas morning. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came every Christmas, every birthday, every family celebration where her absence was more pronounced than her presence. She started to stand, ready to retreat to her room where she could put on her headphones and disappear into music, her one reliable escape. "Wait," Richard's voice stopped her mid-rise. "I almost forgot. There's one more thing." Maya's heart did. Something complicated in her chest, a flutter of hope she immediately tried to suppress. But Richard wasn't reaching for another wrapped present. Instead, he walked to the small desk in the corner where Carmen kept the household bills and returned with an envelope. He held it out to Maya with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Merry Christmas, Maya." The envelope was plain white. No wrapping, no ribbon. Maya took it with trembling fingers, aware that everyone in the room was watching her. Tommy looked confused. Sophia tilted her head curiously, and Carmen's expression was unreadable. Maya opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was Richard's personal stationery, his name embossed at the top in gold letters. In his precise handwriting, he had written, "Silence voucher valid for 1 year of peaceful family harmony. Redeemable whenever you choose to use your inside voice. Merry Christmas. Maya Richard Miller, 2008. The words blurred slightly as Maya read them, her hands shaking. The paper felt heavy, impossibly heavy, as if it contained all the weight of her invisible existence in this house. "It's a reminder," Richard said, his voice gentle but firm, "that sometimes the best gift we can give our family is knowing when to listen instead of speak. When to be grateful for what we have instead of focusing on what we don't." Carmen's face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Sophia, too young to understand the cruelty, asked, "What's a silence voucher, Daddy?" It's a special present that helps. People remember to use their quiet voices, Richard explained, patting Sophia's head. Maya sometimes forgets that not every thought needs to be shared out loud. Maya stared at the paper, reading the words over and over until they burned themselves into her memory. This wasn't just about being quiet, it was about being nothing. About accepting that her thoughts, her feelings, her very existence were burdens to be managed rather than gifts to be celebrated. The room fell silent, except for the soft Christmas music still playing from the speakers. Nat King Cole was singing about chestnuts roasting on an open fire, about folks dressed up like Eskimos, about simple things that made the season bright. Maya wondered if Nat King Cole had ever received a silence voucher for Christmas. "Well," Carmen finally spoke, her voice artificially bright. "Who wants hot chocolate? I'll make it with the special marshmallows." The children cheered the moment, moving on as if nothing significant had happened. As if Maya hadn't just been handed a formal document declaring her worthlessness. Richard gathered wrapping paper, humming along to the music. While Carmen busied herself in the kitchen, Maya folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a small surrender, until she reached her room, the smallest bedroom in the house, painted beige because, as Richard had explained when they moved in, neutral colors were most appropriate for temporary arrangements. She closed the door behind her and sat on her twin bed, still holding the envelope. Her room was sparse compared to Tommy and Sophia's rooms, with their colorful walls and overflowing toy chests. Maya's possessions fit easily in the second-hand dresser and small closet. Clothes that Carmen bought at discount stores. A few books, her father's old guitar that she'd taught herself to play by watching YouTube videos, and a journal where she wrote songs and poems that no one would ever read. On her knitstand sat the only photograph she had of her father, Eduardo Rodriguez, smiling widely with his arm around a younger Carmen, both of them dressed up for someone's wedding. Maya had inherited his deep brown eyes and his thick, dark hair, but more than that, she had inherited his love of music. He used to sing to her when she was little, made-up songs about princesses who saved themselves and birds that flew higher. And the clouds. Maya opened the envelope again and read the silence voucher once more. The paper seemed to mock her with its official appearance, as if Richard had consulted a lawyer about the proper format for crushing a teenager's spirit. Could hear laughter from downstairs, the sounds of a family enjoying their Christmas morning. Carmen was probably pouring hot chocolate into mugs, adding whipped cream and cinnamon, the way Maya had taught her, a tradition from the holidays when it was just the two of them. When Carmen would let Maya help in the kitchen, and they would sing Christmas songs in Spanish while they cooked, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, like scenes from a movie Maya had watched long ago. The mother who used to braid her hair and call her Mi Estrelita, my little star, had been slowly replaced by a woman who looked the same but spoke differently, moved differently, loved differently. Maya understood, intellectually, why her mother had chosen Richard. He offered stability, security, a life without the constant worry about rent and groceries and whether the heat would be shut off. He gave Carmen and Maya a beautiful house in a good neighborhood, health insurance, college funds for his children. Carmen had made a practical choice, a survival choice, but understanding didn't make it hurt, lest. Maya picked up her father's guitar, running her fingers over the worn strings. She had been writing a song lately, something about birds in cages, about voices that got smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely. The melody came to her in fragments, usually late at night when the house was quiet, and she could play without disturbing anyone. She began to strum softly, finding the chord progression that had been haunting her. The words came slowly, quietly. They gave me a voucher on Christmas Day, said silence was golden, showed me the way, but I've got a song that won't stay down, even when no one wants to hear the sound. The lyrics weren't perfect yet, but they felt true. Maya had always written songs, even before she knew that's what she was doing. As a little girl, she would make up rhymes about her day, sing herself to sleep with melodies that existed nowhere but in her head. Music was the one place where her voice felt powerful instead of problematic. A soft knock on her door interrupted her playing. "Maya?" Carmen's voice was tentative, careful. "Can I come in?" Maya set down the guitar and quickly folded the silence voucher, slipping it into her journal. "Sure, Mom." Carmen entered carrying a mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and a cinnamon stick, Maya's favorite. She sat on the edge of the bed, offering the mug with a smile that looked tired around the edges. "I made it the way you like it," Carmen said in Spanish, then caught herself. "The way you like it." Maya accepted the hot chocolate, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "Thanks." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind they used to share easily before Richard, before the careful monitoring of every interaction. Carmen reached out and smoothed Maya's hair, a gesture so familiar and maternal that Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "You know I love you, right?" Carmen whispered. "More than anything in this world?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. She did know that, could feel it in the way Carmen still braided her hair sometimes, still made her favorite foods, still slipped Spanish endearments into conversations when Richard wasn't around. But love complicated by survival looked different than love that was free to express itself fully. "Richard just wants what's best for the family," Carmen continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Sometimes we have to make small sacrifices for the greater good." "Small sacrifices," Maya repeated quietly, Carmen's hand still in Maya's hair. "See, Mia, small ones." But Maya was beginning to understand that there was nothing small about what was being asked of her. To be silent wasn't just about speaking less. It was about existing less, wanting less, being less. It was about making herself so small that her presence couldn't possibly disturb the delicate balance of this new family they'd built. "I should let you rest," Carmen said, standing up. "We'll have Christmas dinner at 3. Abuela Rodriguez is coming." Maya's heart lifted slightly. Her paternal grandmother was one of the few people who still treated Maya as if she fully existed, who spoke to her in rapid Spanish and asked about her dreams and opinions without apology. But then Maya noticed the tension in Carmen's shoulders, the worry line between her eyebrows. "Does Richard know she's coming?" Maya asked. Carmen's pause was answer enough. "She's family," she said finally. "It's Christmas." After Carmen left, Maya sat holding the hot chocolate, watching the whipped cream slowly melt into spirals. She thought about the silence voucher folded in her journal, about the years stretching ahead of her, about the careful choreography required to exist in this house without disrupting its harmony. But she also thought about the song she'd been writing, about the melody that wouldn't leave her alone, about her father's guitar, and the way music had always been her refuge. Some voices, Maya was beginning to realize, were too big to be contained by vouchers and good behavior. She took a sip of the hot chocolate, tasting cinnamon and love and the complicated flavors of a childhood that was ending whether she was ready or not. Outside her window, snow began to fall on Maple Street, covering the perfectly manicured lawns with pristine white silence. But in her small, beige room, Maya Rodriguez was learning that some silences were meant to be broken. Detroit, Michigan. July 15th, 2012. The sweltering heat of a Detroit summer pressed against the cracked windows of the third-floor apartment on Corktown's Michigan Avenue, where Maya Rodriguez had been living for 8 months now. At 19, she looked older than her years. Her dark hair streaked with purple highlights, she'd done herself with dollar store dye. Her father's guitar case covered in stickers from local venues she'd discovered since arriving in the motor city. The apartment was a testament to creative survival. 4 young artists splitting rent on a space that had seen better decades. Exposed brick walls were covered with canvases in various stages of completion, sheets of music scrawled with lyrics, and photographs pinned haphazardly with thumbtacks. The hardwood floors, worn smooth by generations of tenants, creaked under the weight of second-hand furniture and borrowed dreams. Maya sat cross-legged on her mattress. A double bed frame was a luxury they couldn't afford, tuning her father's guitar while her roommate, Zoe, sketched frantically at the kitchen table. That doubled as her art studio. The morning light streaming through the windows revealed the controlled chaos of their shared existence. Dishes in the sink waiting to be washed, laundry hanging from a rope stretched between 2 walls, and the persistent smell of strong coffee. That had become their survival fuel. "You going to Rosie's tonight?" Zoe asked without looking up from her sketchpad. At 22, she was the apartment's unofficial mother figure, a street artist from Chicago who'd migrated to Detroit for its affordable rent and thriving underground scene. Her purple hair was pulled back in a messy bun, revealing the small tattoo behind her left ear, a sparrow in flight. Maya's fingers found a familiar chord progression, one she'd been working on for weeks. Maybe. I don't know. "Come on, Maya. You've been hiding that voice of yours like it's some kind of classified information." Zoe finally looked up, her hazel eyes serious despite her teasing tone. "Remember why you came here?" Maya did remember. 8 months ago, she'd left Pittsburgh with $300, her father's guitar, and a bus ticket she'd bought with money saved from her part-time job at a coffee shop. The silence voucher had lived in her journal for 3.5 years, a constant reminder of her place in the Miller household. But the morning after her high school graduation, when Richard had handed her brochures for community colleges, appropriate for someone with your background, something inside Maya had finally snapped. She'd left a note for her mother, not an explanation, just an address where Carmen could write to her if she wanted to. Maya had chosen Detroit because it was far enough from Pittsburgh to feel like freedom, but close enough that she could take a Greyhound bus if she ever needed to come home. More importantly, Detroit was a city that understood reinvention, that welcomed artists and dreamers who couldn't afford New York or Los Angeles. "Rosie's Bar isn't exactly Carnegie Hall," Maya said, but she was already reaching for the notebook where she kept her lyrics. Neither was the Apollo Theater when it started, called out Jake from the living room. At 24, he was their resident philosopher, a poetry major turned barista who paid his share of the rent by working double shifts at a downtown coffee shop. His voice carried the slight rasp of someone who'd spent too many nights in smoke-filled venues, discussing the meaning of art until sunrise. The 4th roommate, Marcus, emerged from the bathroom with a towel around his waist, his dark skin glistening with shower water. At 28, he was the oldest among them and the most mysterious. Maya had learned fragments of his story over the months. A former music producer from Atlanta who'd lost everything in a business deal gone wrong. A man who'd worked with artists whose names Maya recognized from the radio. Now he installed car stereos during the day and haunted Detroit's music venues at night, always watching, always listening, as if searching for something he'd lost. "You talking about that open mic tonight?" Marcus asked, pulling a clean t-shirt from a laundry basket. "That little girl's been writing songs since she got here. Time she let the world hear what she's got." "I'm not a little girl," Maya protested, but without real heat. Marcus had never treated her like one, despite the age difference. He'd been the one to teach her about Detroit's music history, to explain how the city had birthed Motown, techno, and countless other sounds that had shaped American culture. "And my songs aren't ready." "Songs are never ready," Marcus said, sitting down on the couch that had come with the apartment. "Music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. And you Got more truth in your little finger than most people got in their whole bodies. Maya felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, part excitement, part terror. She'd been attending open mic nights for months, but always as an observer, always making excuses about why she wasn't ready to perform. The truth was, after years of being told to stay quiet, the idea of deliberately drawing attention to herself felt revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, the first in 2 weeks. "Hope you're doing well, Mia. Miss you, Mom." The Spanish endearment made Maya's chest tight. Carmen had been sending these careful messages since Maya left, never asking her to come home, never mentioning Richard or the family life that continued without her. Just small breadcrumbs of love, scattered across the months like a trail Maya could follow back if she chose to. "She's still texting you?" Zoe asked, noticing Maya's expression. "Sometimes." Maya set the phone aside. "It's complicated. Family always is," Jake said from his position on the floor, where he was working on a poem in a spiral notebook. "But that doesn't mean you owe them your voice." The weight of that statement settled over the room. Each of them had come to Detroit carrying family histories that were too heavy or too painful to bear in their hometowns. Zoe had left Chicago after her parents disowned her for dropping out of college to pursue art. Jake had fled a small Ohio town where his sexuality made him a target. Marcus never talked about his family, but Maya suspected his silence carried its own story. "What time does the open mic start?" Maya asked, surprising herself. Marcus grinned, the expression transforming. His usually serious face. 8 o'clock. But if you're going up, you better get there by 7 to put your name on the list." The afternoon passed in a blur of nervous energy. Maya showered with the lukewarm water that was the best their ancient building could manage, chose her outfit carefully: black jeans, a vintage band t-shirt, and the silver necklace her father had given her for her 10th birthday. She spent an hour going through her notebook, selecting 3 songs that felt ready enough to share with strangers. Rosie's bar occupied the ground floor of a brick building that had probably been elegant. Once, decades before urban decay had claimed this part of downtown Detroit. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting red light onto the sidewalk where smokers gathered in small clusters. The bar itself was a study in beautiful decay. Exposed brick walls, covered with concert posters from bands Maya had never heard of, mismatched furniture that had been collected over decades, and a small stage that looked like it had hosted 1,000 broken dreams and just as many triumphant moments. The crowd was typical for a Sunday night open mic, mostly other musicians waiting their turn, a few regulars who came for cheap drinks, and free entertainment, and the occasional curious newcomer drawn by the promise of authentic Detroit culture. Maya recognized several faces from previous visits, including Sarah, a folk singer with a voice like honey and whiskey, and Tony, a rapper whose lyrics about Detroit's struggles and resilience always left the room silent with respect. Maya added her name to the list, Maya Rodriguez, singer-songwriter, and felt her hands shake slightly as she wrote. She ordered a Coke to calm her nerves and found a small table near the back where she could observe without being noticed. The host for the evening was a woman named Linda, probably in her 50s, with silver hair and laugh lines that spoke of decades in Detroit's music scene. She moved through the crowd with easy confidence, chatting with regulars and encouraging first-timers with the practiced warmth of someone who understood that courage came in many forms. "All right, beautiful people," Linda's voice cut through the bar's chatter as she took the stage. "Welcome to another Sunday night at Rosie's, where dreams come to either die or learn to fly. We've got a great lineup tonight, so let's get started." Maya's stomach clenched as Linda read through the performers. Her name was 7th on the list, close enough to the beginning that she couldn't chicken out, far enough that she had time to watch others and learn from their courage. The first performer was a college student who played guitar and sang covers of popular songs with earnest enthusiasm. The second was an older man with a gravelly voice who performed original blues numbers about lost love and hard times. Each act taught Maya something about the alchemy of performance, how some people commanded attention through sheer presence, while others drew audiences in through vulnerability and authenticity. When Sarah took the stage, Maya leaned forward to study her technique. Sarah had a gift for making the largest room feel intimate, for singing directly to individuals in the crowd as if she were sharing secrets. Her song tonight was about leaving home, about the weight of other people's expectations and the freedom that came with disappointing them. This one's for everyone who ever felt like they had to choose between being loved and being true, Sarah said into the microphone, and Maya felt those words settle into her bones. The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause, and Maya realized that everyone in this room carried similar stories. They were all refugees from something: small towns, broken families, traditional expectations that couldn't contain their dreams. In this dive bar with its flickering neon and mismatched chairs, they'd found a sanctuary where their voices mattered. Next up, we have Maya Rodriguez with some original songs. Maya, come on up here and show us what you've got. Maya's legs felt unsteady as she made her way to the stage, her father's guitar case in one hand, her notebook in the other. The stage lights were brighter than she'd expected, making it difficult to see individual faces in the crowd. She adjusted the microphone stand with shaking fingers and pulled her guitar from its case. "Hi," she said into the microphone, her voice sounding small and uncertain. "I'm Maya, and these are some songs I've been working on." She settled onto the stool that Linda had provided and found the first chord of her opening song, one she'd written about the bus ride from Pittsburgh to Detroit, about watching familiar landscapes disappear through a Greyhound window. Her voice started quietly, almost conversationally, as if she were singing to herself in her bedroom. But as she reached the chorus, something magical happened. The words that had lived silently in her notebook for months suddenly filled the space between her and the audience, carrying with them all the loneliness and hope and determination that had brought her to this moment. Her voice grew stronger, more confident, finding power she didn't know she possessed. The room had grown quiet in the way that indicated genuine attention rather than polite tolerance. Maya could feel the audience leaning in, connecting with the universal themes of her lyrics, even as she shared her specific story. When she finished the first song, the applause was warm and encouraging. "That was beautiful," someone called out from the crowd, and Maya felt her confidence grow. Her second song was more upbeat, a defiant anthem about refusing to shrink to fit other people's expectations. The lyrics came from months of anger and frustration, from years of being told that her thoughts and dreams were inconvenient. But set to music and performed in this accepting space, that anger transformed into something powerful and inspiring. By the time she reached her third song, the one about birds in cages that she'd started writing on Christmas morning 4 years ago, Maya felt completely present in her own skin. The metaphor had evolved over the years, becoming more sophisticated and nuanced, but the core truth remained the same. Some voices were too big to be contained. "They gave me a voucher on Christmas Day," she sang, her voice now strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "Said silence was golden, showed me the way, but I've got a song that won't stay down, even when no one wants to hear the sound." The bridge of the song was new, written just weeks ago. "Now I'm standing on stages in cities unknown, singing the songs that I've always owned. The voucher's still with me, but I've learned the truth silence ain't golden when you're telling your truth." As the last chord faded, the room erupted in applause that felt different from polite appreciation. People were standing, some calling out encouragement, others simply nodding with the recognition that comes from hearing your own. story reflected in someone else's words. Maya stood and bowed slightly, overwhelmed by the response. As she packed up her guitar, people approached the stage to compliment her performance, to ask about her songs, to share their own stories of finding their voices in unexpected places. But it was Marcus who surprised her most. She hadn't even noticed him enter the bar, but there he was, standing near the stage, with an expression she'd never seen before: pride, mixed with something that looked like recognition. "Where did that come from?" he asked as she descended from the stage. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "It felt like it was always there, just waiting." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what real talent feels like coming home to yourself." He paused, studying her face. "You know I used to produce records, right? Back in Atlanta?" Maya nodded. It was one of the few facts she knew about Marcus's previous life. "I worked with a lot of singers. Most of them could carry a tune. Some of them had good songs. A few had stage presence. But very rarely did I work with someone who had all three. Plus that fourth thing, the thing that makes people stop what they're doing and really listen." "What's the fourth thing?" Maya asked. "Authenticity, truth, the willingness to be vulnerable in front of strangers and make them feel less alone in the world." Marcus smiled. "You've got it, Maya, all of it." As they walked home through Detroit's summer night, the city's skyline glittering against the dark sky, Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. For years, she'd been told that her voice was a problem to be managed, that her thoughts and feelings were burdens to be minimized. But tonight, in a dive bar in front of strangers, she'd discovered the opposite was true. Her voice wasn't a problem, it was a gift. Not just to herself, but to everyone who heard it and recognized their own struggles, their own dreams, their own refusal to stay silent in a world that often demanded it. Back at the apartment, Zoe and Jake were waiting up, eager to hear about the performance. As Maya recounted the evening, she realized that for the first time since leaving Pittsburgh, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The silence voucher was still tucked in her journal, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it had become a reminder of how far she'd traveled, not just geographically, but emotionally and artistically. The girl who had received that cruel Christmas gift was gone, replaced by a young woman who understood that her voice was not something to be hidden, but something to be shared with the world. Outside their windows, Detroit slept fitfully, a city that had learned to transform pain into art, loss into resilience. In that small apartment filled with dreams and determination, Maya Rodriguez was learning the same lesson, one song at a time. Nashville, Tennessee, October 12, 2016. The autumn air in Nashville carried the smell of fallen leaves and broken dreams, a combination Maya Rodriguez had grown intimately familiar with during her 2 years in Music City. At 23, she looked like someone who had learned to survive on little sleep and even less money, her dark hair pulled back in a perpetual ponytail, her clothes a careful balance between presentable for auditions and practical for the Kenth. 3 jobs that kept her afloat. She sat in her 2005 Honda Civic in the parking lot of Pancake Pantry, where she worked the breakfast shift 4 days a week, reading another rejection email on her cracked phone screen. This one was from Blackbird Studios, where she'd auditioned 3 weeks ago for a backup vocalist position that would have paid enough to let her quit at least one of her other jobs. "Thank you for your interest in the position. While your vocal abilities are impressive, we've decided to go with someone whose style better fits our current roster. We wish you the best of luck in your musical endeavors." Naya had memorized the language of polite rejection. Impressive but not quite right. Talented but not what we're looking for. Great voice but not the right fit. Each email was a small death, a paper cut that stung precisely because it came wrapped in compliments that somehow made the dismissal worse. She deleted the email. and checked the time. 5:47 a.m. Her shift started at 6, and she needed to get inside to help with the breakfast rush that would sustain Nashville's early-rising music industry workers, tourists hoping to spot a country star over coffee, and fellow struggling artists who came in for the free refills and stayed for hours writing songs on napkins. The diner was already busy when Maya tied her apron around her waist and grabbed the coffee pot. Marcus waved from his usual corner booth, where he was nursing his second cup of black coffee and reviewing contracts on his laptop. He'd followed Maya to Nashville 8 months ago, drawn by the promise of more opportunities in a city that lived and breathed music. Together, they'd managed to rent a studio apartment above a guitar repair shop in the Gulch, splitting the costs and living in a space barely bigger than their Detroit apartment's living room. Morning Sunshine called Betty, the day manager, a 60-year-old woman who'd been working at the Pancake Pantry since before Maya was born. "You look like someone who could use some caffeine. That obvious?" Maya asked, pouring herself a cup from the pot she was carrying. "Honey, I've been watching musicians try to make it in this town for 40 years. Y'all all have the same look, equal parts determination and exhaustion." Betty handed Maya a stack of menus. Table 12 just sat down. They look like industry folks, so smile pretty. Maya made her way to table 12, where 2 men in their 30s sat discussing what sounded like marketing strategies for an upcoming album release. She recognized the conversation. She'd overheard hundreds of similar discussions while serving coffee to A and R representatives, producers and label executives who treated Nashville's diners like their personal offices. "Good morning, gentlemen. Coffee to start?" "Please," the younger man said without looking up from his phone. "And can you bring some of those little creamers? The real ones, not the powdered stuff." Maya poured their coffee and took their order 2 egg platters in wheat. Toast, the kind of practical breakfast that suggested these were working meetings rather than social occasions. As she walked away, she caught fragments of their conversation about streaming numbers and radio play, the metrics that determined which artists got opportunities and which remained invisible. The morning rush passed in its usual blur of coffee, refills, order taking, and the careful choreography required to navigate a busy diner without losing her mind. Maya had learned to use these shifts as mental breaks from the constant stress of pursuing music, letting her body work on autopilot while her mind processed melodies and lyrics. During her break, she stepped outside to check her phone and found a text from Carmen. "Saw your video on Facebook. You look so grown up, Mia. Proud of you. Love, Mom." The video Carmen referenced was from Maya's performance at the Bluebird Cafe the previous week, a 15-minute set that had felt like the most important moment of her career so far. The Bluebird was legendary in Nashville, a small venue where countless songwriters had been discovered, where industry professionals came to find the next big thing. Maya had waited 11 months to get a slot on their open mic night, and when her moment finally came, she'd performed 3 of her strongest songs for a crowd that included several people with business cards and impressive LinkedIn profiles. Performance had gone well enough that 2 people had approached her afterward with vague promises about staying in touch and keeping an eye on her career. Maya had posted a short clip on her Facebook page, mostly for her Detroit friends to see, but it had been shared dozens of times and accumulated more views than anything she'd ever posted. She called Carmen back, something she'd been doing more frequently since moving to Nashville. The distance from Pittsburgh somehow made the relationship easier, less complicated by the presence of Richard and the careful dynamics that still govern the Miller household. "Maya, I was hoping you'd call." Carmen's voice carried the warmth that Maya remembered from childhood, before survival had required careful modulation of emotions. "That video was beautiful, Nia. Your voice sounds so strong." "Thanks, Mom. How are Sophia and Tommy? Growing up too fast?" Sophia's in middle school now. Can you believe it? And Tommy's playing soccer. They ask about you sometimes? Maya felt the familiar pang of missing siblings who barely knew her, who had been trained not to think of her as an essential part of their family structure. What do you tell them? The truth. That you're following your dreams in Nashville, that you're brave and talented, and we're proud of you. Maya wondered what Richard thought of these conversations, whether Carmen had to schedule them for times when he wasn't home. But she'd learned not to ask questions that might complicate their newly rebuilt relationship. Are you taking care of yourself? Carmen asked. Eating enough? Getting sleep? Maya looked around at the parking lot where she was standing, at the restaurant where she served breakfast to people pursuing the same dreams she was, at the Honda Civic that had become her office, dressing room, and sometimes bedroom when she was too tired to drive home. I'm doing okay, Mom. It's hard, but I'm okay. I know it's hard, mi amor, but I believe in you. I always have. After hanging up, Maya sat in her car for the remaining 10 minutes of her break, processing the conversation. Carmen's belief in her was real and sustaining, but it also highlighted how isolated Maya had become in pursuing her dreams. Most days, she felt like she was shouting into a void, hoping someone would hear her and recognize her talent before her money ran out or her spirit broke. Her afternoon was spent at her second job, working as a demo singer at a small recording studio in the Gulch. The work was inconsistent, but paid well when it was available. Maya would record rough versions of songs that songwriters wanted to pitch to major artists, lending her voice to melodies and lyrics that would later be performed by people with record deals and radio play. Today's session was for a ballad, written by a husband and wife team who'd had moderate success placing songs with country artists. Maya listened to the rough track through headphones while following along with the lyric sheet, learning the melody quickly the way professional singers were expected to do. The song was about leaving home and finding yourself in unexpected places, themes that resonated deeply with Maya's own experience. As she sang the demo, she found herself investing real emotion in the performance, imagining what it would feel like to hear this song on the radio, to know that her voice was reaching people she'd never meet. That was perfect, the songwriter said through the talkback system after Maya's third take. You really captured the emotional core of the song. We might use that exact vocal on the pitch. Maya smiled and nodded, but inside she felt the familiar frustration of being talented enough to bring other people's songs to life, while struggling to get anyone to listen to her own material. The demo session paid her $150, enough to cover groceries for 2 weeks, but it also reminded her that she was still performing other people's dreams instead of her own. Her third job was bartending at a honky-tonk on Broadway, Nashville's tourist-heavy strip where cover bands played classic country songs for crowds of bachelorette parties and convention attendees. The work was exhausting, but lucrative tips from drunk tourists could sometimes match what she made in a full day at the diner. Tonight's shift started at 8, giving Maya just enough time to drive home, shower, and change into the required uniform of black jeans and the bar's logo t-shirt. Marcus was in their tiny apartment when she arrived, working on his laptop with spreadsheets that tracked the dozen or so independent artists he was beginning to manage. How was the demo session? He asked, without looking up from his screen. Good. Frustrating. The usual. Maya kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto their second-hand couch. Sometimes I feel like I'm a ghost, you know? Like I'm haunting other people's music careers. Marcus closed his laptop and looked at her with the serious expression she'd come to associate with his most important advice. You know what your problem is? Enlighten me. You're too good at everything except the business side. You can sing, you can write, you can perform, but you're trying to make it in an industry that doesn't know how to categorize you, and you're not fighting hard enough to create your own category. Maya frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you keep auditioning for other people's visions instead of forcing them to pay attention to yours. That Bluebird performance? That was you. That was your sound, your songs, your story, and people responded to it. But then you go back to singing DMOS and serving coffee instead of building on that momentum. I need the money, Marcus. I can't. Just quit my jobs and hope the universe provides. I'm not saying quit everything. I'm saying be more strategic. That video from the Bluebird has over 2,000 views now. People are sharing it, commenting on it. You've got something that's connecting with people, but you're not capitalizing on it. Maya pulled out her phone and checked the Facebook video. Marcus was right. The view count had grown significantly since she'd last looked, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive. People were asking where they could hear more of her music, when her next show was, whether she had an album available. I don't have an album, Maya said. I don't even have a decent recording of most of my songs. Then let's make one. Marcus opened his laptop again and pulled up a document he'd been working on. I've been putting together a plan. There's a studio in East Nashville that gives independent artists good rates for off-peak hours. We could record an EP 5 songs that really showcase your range and your songwriting. Then we used it to book better gigs, to submit to music, blogs, to get on the radar of people who matter. Maya looked at the budget Marcus had calculated. Even with his connections and the discounted studio rate, recording a professional EP would cost more money than she had saved, more than she could earn from her current jobs, without working herself to exhaustion. I can't afford this, she said. Quietly, we'll figure it out. I've got some money saved, and I know people who owe me favors. The point is, you've got to stop thinking like someone who's asking for permission and start thinking like someone who deserves to be heard. That night at the Honky Tonk, Maya worked behind the bar while a cover band performed hits from the 1990s for a crowd of rowdy tourists. The band was competent but uninspired, going through the motions of performance without any of the passion. That made music transformative. Maya found herself thinking about Marcus's words as she poured drinks and collected tips. Around midnight, during a brief lull in the crowd, Maya's phone buzzed with a notification she'd never received before. Someone had tagged her in a post on Instagram. She opened the app to find that a music blogger with 50,000 followers had shared the clip of her Bluebird performance, writing, "Keep an eye on Maya Rodriguez. This Nashville newcomer has the kind of voice that stops you in your tracks. Reminds me of early Patty Griffin meets Joni Mitchell. Real songwriter, real artist." Maya stared at the post, reading the caption over and over. The blogger's followers were already liking and commenting, asking for more information about Maya's music. Her own Instagram account, which had fewer than 300 followers, was suddenly gaining new ones by the minute. "Everything okay over there?" asked Jake, the bar's manager, noticing Maya's expression. "Yeah, I think so. Actually, maybe more than okay." By the time her shift ended at 2 a.m., Maya's social media had exploded in a way she'd never experienced. The blogger's post had been shared by other music accounts, picked up by a Nashville Scene newsletter, and reposted by several of the people who'd been at the Bluebird that night. Her inbox was filling with messages from other musicians wanting to collaborate, promoters asking about booking information, and fans simply expressing their appreciation for her music. Maya drove home through Nashville's empty streets, processing what felt like a fundamental shift in her trajectory. For months, she'd been working desperately to get noticed, sending demos that went unheard and playing shows for empty rooms. But tonight, the internet had done what years of hustle hadn't accomplished. It had amplified her voice beyond the confines of Nashville's insular music scene. When she got home, Marcus was still awake, working on his laptop with the focused intensity he brought to projects he cared about. "How was work?" he asked, then looked up and saw her expression. What happened? Maya showed him her phone, scrolling through the notifications and new followers. Marcus's eyes widened as he read the blogger's post and saw the engagement it had generated. "This is what I was talking about," he said, his voice excited. "This is the momentum we can build on. Look at these comments. People are asking where they can buy your music, when your next show is, whether you're planning a tour. But I don't have answers to any of those questions. Then we better get some answers fast." Marcus opened a new document on his laptop. "We're going to record that EP, and we're going to do it right. No more waiting for permission. No more playing small. You've got people's attention now. Let's give them something worth listening to." Maya sat down next to him, looking at the screen where he was already outlining a plan that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time since leaving Detroit, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of just running. Away from something else. Outside their window, Nashville slept fitfully. A city full of dreamers who'd come seeking the same recognition that Maya was finally beginning to taste. But in their tiny apartment above the guitar repair shop, Maya Rodriguez was learning that success in music wasn't about waiting to be discovered. It was about making yourself impossible to ignore. The silence voucher was still tucked in her journal, but it had become something different over the years. No longer a symbol of her imposed invisibility, it had transformed into a reminder of how far her voice could travel when she finally decided to use it. And tonight, for the first time, Maya could hear that voice echoing back to her from places she'd never been, carried by people she'd never met, who somehow understood exactly what she was trying to say. Los Angeles, California, April 8, 2019. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Hollywood Bowl's iconic white arches as Maya Rodriguez stood on the stage that had hosted everyone from the Beatles to Billie Holiday. At 26, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had learned to transform survival into strength. Her dark hair now professionally styled, but still rebellious enough to hint at her underground roots. Soundcheck had gone perfectly. Her 5-piece band musicians she'd carefully selected over the past year as her independent career gained momentum moved through her setlist with the easy chemistry that came from months of touring small venues across the country. Tonight's show was different, though. Tonight, Maya was opening for Brandi Carlile, a dream opportunity that had materialized after Brandi herself had discovered Maya's music through a Spotify playlist and invited her to join the tour. "Levels look good for me," called James, her sound engineer, from the mixing board positioned in the amphitheater center. "You want to run through Silence Voucher one more time?" Maya nodded, settling her guitar strap across her shoulder. Silence Voucher had become her signature song, the one that audiences requested most, and the one that had propelled her independent EP to over 1 million streams across all platforms. The song that had started as a teenage cry of pain in a Pittsburgh bedroom had evolved into an anthem for anyone who'd ever been told to diminish themselves. As she began the opening chords, Maya's eyes swept across the empty seats that would soon hold 6,000 people, the largest audience of her career. The venue's legendary acoustics carried her voice effortlessly to the furthest reaches of the amphitheater, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine her father sitting in those seats, pride radiating from his face as he watched his daughter command a stage he'd only dreamed of. "Sounds beautiful, Maya," Brandi Carlile's voice carried across the stage as she appeared from the wings. At 37, Brandi moved with the grace of someone completely at ease with her artistry, her blonde hair catching the California sunlight. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied, though the butterflies in her stomach suggested otherwise. "I remember my first time playing the bowl," Brandi said, settling onto the piano bench that would later accompany her own set. "Threw up twice before going on stage. But the moment you hear 6,000 people singing your words back to you, everything changes. You realize you're not just performing, you're connecting souls. Maya had interviewed Brandy 3 weeks ago for a podcast about songwriting, and they'd spent an hour discussing the responsibility that came with giving voice to other people's experiences. Brandy had become both a mentor and an inspiration, showing Maya what it looked like to build a sustainable career while maintaining artistic integrity. Ms. Rodriguez, a young man with a clipboard and an efficient manner, approached the stage. There are some people here to see you. They say they're family. Maya's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to anyone from Pittsburgh in over 6 months, and the last communication had been a carefully neutral birthday text from Carmen. The idea that her family had traveled to Los Angeles without warning felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Where are they? Maya asked, though part of her already knew she wasn't ready for this conversation. Green room tent, behind the main stage. Should I tell them you'll be there in a few minutes? Maya looked at Brandy, who was watching. This exchange with a knowing expression of someone who understood family complications. Want me to come with you? Brandy offered. Sometimes these reunions go better with a witness. No, but thank you. I need to face this myself. Maya made her way through the labyrinth of equipment cases and crew members bustling around the venues. Backstage area. The green room tent was positioned to give performers privacy while still allowing easy access to the stage, and Maya could hear familiar voices inside as she approached. She paused outside the tent flap, gathering courage the way she had before every important performance. Through the thin material, she could hear Carmen's voice, speaking in rapid Spanish to someone, probably Sofia, who would be 16 now. There was also Richard's deeper tone, measured and controlled as always, and another voice Maya didn't immediately recognize. Maya pulled back the tent flap and stepped inside. The first person she saw was Carmen, now 39 and wearing the kind of outfit Maya recognized as meeting famous people clothes, a navy dress with a matching cardigan, pearl earrings, and the careful makeup of someone who wanted to make a good impression. Her mother's face lit up with genuine joy and relief upon seeing Maya. Mia! Carmen stood immediately, her arms extended for an embrace that Maya found herself returning despite the complicated emotions swirling in her chest. You look so beautiful, so professional. Sofia sat in a folding chair nearby, and Maya was startled by how much her half-sister had grown. The 6-year-old from Maya's memories had become a teenager with Carmen's bone structure and Richard's light eyes, her dark hair styled in the way that suggested she cared about her appearance, but was still figuring out her personal style. Hey, Maya, Sofia said, her voice carrying a shyness that suggested she wasn't sure what the relationship was supposed to be after all these years. Tommy, now 18 and clearly uncomfortable in khakis and a button-down shirt, gave Maya an awkward wave. He'd grown tall and lanky, his blonde hair darker now, but still recognizably Miller genetics. Cool venue, he said, looking around the tent with the kind of appreciation that suggested he might actually be impressed. And then there was Richard, standing near the back of the tent with the bearing of someone who had prepared for this moment. At 49, he looked older than Maya remembered, his hairline receding and his face carrying lines that spoke of stress or responsibility. He wore a suit that was probably his best, and his expression was carefully neutral. Maya, Richard said, stepping forward with his hand extended as if they were meeting for the first time. Congratulations on your success. We're very proud of what you've accomplished. Maya stared at his outstretched hand, processing the surreal nature of this moment. The man who had given her a silence voucher 11 years ago was now standing in her dressing room, claiming pride in the voice he had tried to suppress. How did you know about tonight? Maya asked instead of taking his hand. Your mother follows your career online, Richard said, lowering his hand smoothly. When we saw that you were opening at the Hollywood Bowl, we thought it would be a good opportunity to reconnect. We wanted to surprise you, Carmen added, though her voice carried uncertainty about whether the surprise was welcome. We drove down from San Francisco. Richard has business there this week. Maya noticed that even now, Carmen deferred to Richard's schedule, built their family trip around his professional obligations. Some patterns, it seemed, never changed. You've done very well for yourself, Richard continued, his tone carrying the measured approval of someone reviewing a business proposal. Your manager Marcus, is it? He seems very capable. We spoke with him briefly when we arrived. The idea that Richard had been discussing her career with Marcus felt invasive, as if he were trying to insert himself into a life he had systematically excluded himself from. Maya felt her jaw tighten. We brought you something, Sophia said suddenly, pulling a wrapped package from her purse. It's not much, but Nan thought you might like it. Maya accepted the gift with hands that trembled slightly. Inside the wrapping was a photo album, clearly assembled with care. The first page showed pictures of Maya as a baby with Carmen and Eduardo, images Maya hadn't seen in years. As she flipped through the pages, she saw her childhood documented. In careful chronological order: birthday parties, school performances, Christmas mornings before Richard entered their lives. I saved all your pictures, Carmen said softly, even when things were complicated. I never threw anything away. I wanted you to have them. Maya's eyes stopped on a photo from her 15th Christmas, the morning she received the silence voucher. In the picture, she sat on the stairs in the background while Tommy and Sophia opened presents, her face carefully blank, but her body language screaming isolation. Someone had included this photo deliberately, and Maya suspected. It wasn't Richard. Why now? Maya asked, looking up from the album. Why come here? Why this moment? Richard shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Carmen before speaking. We've been following your career, and we're impressed by what you've built. Your music, your success, it reflects well on our family. Our family? Maya's voice carried an edge that made everyone in the tent go still. I wasn't aware I was still part of that. Maya, please, Carmen said, her voice pleading. We know things weren't perfect before, but we're here now. We want to be part of your life. When it's convenient, Maya said, closing the photo album with more force than necessary. When it looks good. When there are pictures to be taken and success to be associated with. That's not fair, Richard said, his composure slipping slightly. We've always supported